Maya Johnson had always been someone who believed in hard work paying off. Growing up in a small town where opportunities were few, she learned early on that nothing came easy unless you fought for it. Now, at 32, Maya was living proof of what determination could achieve. She worked as a data analyst for one of Chicago's top financial firms, nestled high above the bustling streets on the 35th floor of a gleaming skyscraper. Her desk overlooked the city skyline, a constant reminder of how far she'd come. But success didn't shield her from challenges. Being one of the few black women in her department meant navigating spaces where she often felt out of place. Some days, it was the little things. A colleague speaking over her during meetings, another ignoring her ideas only to praise them when repeated by someone else. Other times it was more blatant, like jokes about her natural hair or comments questioning whether she truly belonged there. Still, Maya kept her head high. She told herself these moments would pass, and they usually did. Until today. It started like any other day. Maya arrived at the office just after 8, carrying her usual cup of coffee and a notebook filled with notes from the previous evening's research. As she settled into her chair, her phone buzzed with a text from Daniel, her husband. "Thinking about surprising you at lunch," he wrote. Maya smiled, feeling a warmth spread through her chest. Daniel had a way of making even ordinary days feel special. They'd met years ago at a tech conference, both outsiders in their respective fields but drawn together by shared dreams and ambitions. He was now a billionaire entrepreneur, known for his innovative startups and philanthropic efforts. Despite his wealth and fame, Daniel never let it go to his head. To Maya, he was simply her partner, the person who believed in her when others doubted. By mid-morning, the office buzzed with activity. The quarterly report meeting loomed ahead, and tensions ran high. Everyone knew this presentation mattered. It would determine bonuses and promotions for the next 6 months. Maya spent hours preparing, poring over spreadsheets and graphs to ensure her analysis was flawless. When the meeting finally began, she walked into the conference room with confidence, ready to present her findings. Kevin Hayes sat across the table, scrolling lazily through his phone while others spoke. Kevin wasn't exactly liked around the office, but his position as a middle manager gave him enough authority to get away with bad behavior. He had a reputation for being dismissive, especially toward women and minorities. Today was no exception. When Maya stood up to share her insights, Kevin barely glanced at her slides. Instead, he interrupted her halfway through, claiming her numbers didn't align with his projections. "Are you sure about this?" he asked, his tone dripping with condescension. "Because my team came up with something completely different." Maya took a deep breath, refusing to let his attitude rattle her. "I double-checked everything," she replied calmly. "If you want, we can review your data afterwards to see where the discrepancies might be." Kevin smirked, leaning back in his chair. "Sure thing. Let's hope your math checks out." His comment drew a few chuckles from his friends seated nearby, though most people remained silent. Sensing the tension in the air, Maya finished her presentation without further interruptions, but she couldn't shake the feeling that Kevin had intentionally tried to undermine her. After the meeting ended, Maya returned to her desk, determined to move past the awkward exchange. She decided to grab a quick snack from the break room before diving back into work. That's when it happened. As she reached for a bottle of water from the fridge, Kevin strolled in, flanked by 2 of his buddies. They laughed loudly, clearly in good spirits. Maya nodded politely, hoping to avoid another confrontation. But Kevin seemed intent on picking a fight. He gestured dramatically toward her, pretending to trip and knocking over a can of soda sitting precariously on the counter. Before Maya could react, sticky liquid splashed all over her blouse and skirt. "Oh wow, clumsy me," Kevin exclaimed, throwing his hands up in mock surprise. His friends burst into laughter, doubling over as if it were the funniest thing they'd ever seen. Maya froze, stunned by the suddenness of it all. The cold soda soaked through her clothes, leaving dark patches that clung uncomfortably to her skin. Humiliation burned in her cheeks as she realized everyone in the break room was watching. "I'm so sorry," Kevin continued, though his grin betrayed his insincerity. "Guess I should watch where I'm going, huh?" Maya clenched her fists, fighting back tears. She wanted to scream to call him out for what he really was, a bully hiding behind false apologies. But instead, she forced herself to remain composed. Picking up a napkin, she dabbed at the stain, muttering under her breath, "It's fine." Her calm response only fueled Kevin's bravado. "Come on, don't be mad," he said, still smirking. "It was just a joke." Just then, a figure appeared in the doorway. Tall, broad-shouldered, and impeccably dressed, Daniel Carter stepped inside holding a brown paper bag in one hand. His sharp eyes scanned the room, taking in the scene before him. Employees immediately straightened up, whispering excitedly, as they recognized the billionaire tech mogul from magazine covers and TV interviews. Daniel's gaze landed on Maya, and his expression softened. Walking over to her, he set the bag down and pulled her into a gentle hug. "Hey," he murmured, brushing a strand of hair away from her face. "What happened?" Maya hesitated, unsure how much to say. But seeing the concern in Daniel's eyes, she sighed and gestured toward Kevin. "He spilled soda on me," she admitted quietly. "Said it was a joke." Daniel turned to face Kevin, his jaw tightening ever so slightly. Though his voice remained calm, there was an unmistakable edge to it. "Is that true?" he asked, addressing Kevin directly. Kevin shifted uncomfortably, suddenly aware of the weight of the situation. Yeah, I mean, it was just a joke?" Daniel cut him off, raising an eyebrow. Interesting choice of humor. The room fell silent, every eye fixed on the unfolding drama. For the first time, Kevin looked unsure of himself. His earlier bravado vanished, replaced by a flicker of panic. Little did he know, this was only the beginning. This concludes part 1. Let me know if you'd like me to proceed with subsequent parts. Daniel Carter was not a man who raised his voice often. His presence alone commanded attention, and he knew it. Standing in the doorway of the break room, he exuded an aura of authority that made everyone around him freeze. Employees exchanged nervous glances, unsure how to react to this unexpected turn of events. Some recognized Daniel instantly. His face had been on magazine covers and news articles countless times, but even those who didn't know him could sense his influence, just by the way he carried himself. Kevin Hayes, still holding onto the empty soda can, tried to laugh off the situation one more time. "Like I said, it was just a joke," he muttered, forcing a smile that didn't reach his eyes. But Daniel wasn't buying it. His piercing gaze locked onto Kevin, making the younger man squirm under the pressure. "Let me get this straight," Daniel began, his tone measured but laced with steel. "You thought drenching my wife with soda would be funny?" The word wife hung in the air like a thunderclap. Until now, no one in the office had known about Maya and Daniel's relationship. To them, Maya was just another employee, a talented data analyst, sure, but not someone they associated with wealth or power. Seeing her standing next to Daniel, clearly supported and protected by him, shifted the dynamics of the room entirely. Whispers rippled through the crowd as people pieced together the connection. Maya crossed her arms over her chest, trying to maintain some semblance of composure despite feeling exposed. She hated being the center of attention, especially in moments like this. Still, having Daniel there gave her strength she hadn't felt earlier. For once, she didn't have to fight alone. Kevin stammered, struggling to find words. "I mean, come on, man. It's not a big deal." Daniel tilted his head slightly, studying Kevin as if he were dissecting a particularly unimpressive bug. "Not a big deal?" he repeated slowly, letting the phrase sink in. "So, you think humiliating someone at work is acceptable behavior? Is that what passes for fun around here?" Kevin glanced at his friends for backup, but they quickly averted their eyes, unwilling to draw Daniel's wrath. One of them shuffled backward toward the door, clearly eager to escape the escalating confrontation. The rest of the employees in the break room stood frozen, torn between fear of Daniel and mild embarrassment for Kevin. Maya finally spoke up, her voice steady but quiet. "It wasn't the first time something like this has happened," she admitted, looking directly at Daniel. There have been other things, too. Comments, jokes, little remarks meant to make me feel out of place. Her words hit Daniel like a punch to the gut. He turned back to Kevin, his expression darkening further. And you think that's okay? That kind of behavior isn't just disrespectful. It's toxic. And it stops right now. By this point, the entire office seemed to be watching. People gathered outside the break room, peeking in through the glass walls to catch a glimpse of the drama unfolding inside. Phones buzzed quietly as rumors spread faster than wildfire. No one dared to interrupt, though. This was Daniel Carter's show, and everyone knew it. Realizing he couldn't charm his way out of this, Kevin attempted to defend himself. "Look, I didn't mean anything by it," he insisted, his voice rising slightly. "It was harmless. If she'd just lighten up." "Lighten up?" Daniel interrupted sharply, cutting Kevin off mid-sentence. "Do you hear yourself? You humiliate someone, then blame them for reacting? That's not leadership, that's cowardice." Kevin opened his mouth to argue, but closed it again almost immediately. There was no winning against Daniel, and he knew it. Instead, he shot a pleading glance at Maya, hoping she might step in and soften the blow. But Maya remained silent, her arms crossed tightly across her chest. She wasn't about to let Kevin off the hook, not after everything he'd done. Sensing the growing tension, Daniel decided to take control of the situation. He addressed the room at large, his voice carrying enough authority to silence even the faintest whisper. "This isn't just about today," he said firmly. "What happened here reflects deeper issues within this workplace, issues that need to be addressed immediately." He gestured toward Maya, his tone softening ever so slightly. "My wife deserves better than this. All of you deserve better than this. A workplace should be a place where people feel valued and respected, not afraid to speak up because they'll be dismissed or ridiculed." His words resonated deeply with many of the employees present. Some nodded in agreement, while others looked guilty, knowing full well they'd witnessed similar incidents in the past without speaking up. Even those who hadn't personally experienced discrimination could see the cracks in the foundation of the company culture. Daniel continued, his focus shifting back to Kevin. "As for you," he said, pointing a finger at the younger man, "you owe Maya an apology. Not a half-hearted excuse, but a genuine one. And after that, we're going to have a serious conversation about accountability." Kevin swallowed hard, visibly sweating under the weight of Daniel's glare. "Fine," he mumbled, barely audible. "I'm sorry, Maya." Maya raised an eyebrow, unimpressed by the lackluster apology. "Thanks," she replied dryly, though her tone suggested she didn't believe a word of it. With that settled, or at least temporarily resolved, Daniel turned his attention to the larger issue at hand. He pulled out his phone and sent a quick text, summoning his assistant to arrange an emergency meeting with HR and senior management. Within minutes, executives began filing into the office, alerted by Daniel's team about the brewing crisis. One of the vice presidents approached cautiously, attempting to smooth things over. "Mr. Carter, I assure you this is highly unusual for our company," he said, offering a weak smile. "We'll handle it promptly." Daniel fixed him with a steely gaze. "I hope so," he replied coolly. "Because if this doesn't change, neither will my stance on continuing our partnership." The threat hung heavy in the air. Everyone in the room understood what that meant. Daniel Carter's financial backing kept this branch afloat. Losing his support would spell disaster for the company. Suddenly, the stakes felt much higher than a single incident involving a spilled drink. As the executives scrambled to organize a formal meeting, Maya stepped aside with Daniel, needing a moment to process everything that had transpired. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice trembling slightly, "for coming in when you did." Daniel wrapped an arm around her shoulders, pulling her close. "You never have to thank me for standing by your side," he said softly. "But I wish you'd told me sooner about all of this." Maya sighed, leaning into him. "I didn't want to bother you with work stuff, plus I thought I could handle it myself." "You shouldn't have to," Daniel replied firmly. "No one should have to put up with this kind of treatment. We're going to fix it together." Back in the conference room, tensions ran high as Daniel outlined his expectations for reform. He demanded transparency, accountability, and measurable progress toward creating a safer, more inclusive environment for all employees. Meanwhile, Kevin sat slumped in his chair, realizing too late that his actions had consequences far beyond a ruined shirt. For Maya, the day marked a turning point. She knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy, but for the first time in a long time, she felt hopeful. With Daniel by her side, she believed real change was possible, and she was ready to fight for it. The conference room was eerily quiet as Daniel Carter took his seat at the head of the table. Executives shuffled nervously, avoiding eye contact with each other and focusing instead on their notebooks or phones. Maya stood near the window, her arms crossed tightly over her chest. She watched silently as Daniel laid out his demands, his tone calm but firm. This meeting wasn't just about her. It was about everyone who had ever felt marginalized or dismissed in this workplace. Daniel began by addressing the elephant in the room, Kevin Hayes' actions earlier that day. What happened today wasn't an isolated incident, he said, his voice carrying authority without raising its volume. It's part of a pattern, a culture that allows disrespect and discrimination to thrive unchecked. And that ends now. One of the executives, a middle-aged man named Richard, cleared his throat awkwardly. Mr. Carter, we understand your concerns, but surely this is a matter best handled internally. We can address it through our usual channels. I'm sorry, Daniel interrupted, leaning forward slightly. But your usual channels clearly aren't working. If they were, my wife wouldn't be standing here after being humiliated, in front of her colleagues. His words landed like a hammer, silencing any further protests. Maya glanced at Daniel, appreciating how he referred to her, not as his property, but as someone he deeply respected and wanted to protect. It gave her strength even though she still felt exposed. She stepped closer to the table, deciding it was time to speak up. Daniel's right, she said, her voice steady despite the nerves bubbling inside her. This isn't just about me. There are others. People who've been treated unfairly, who've faced comments or jokes or worse and didn't feel safe enough to say anything. I stayed silent for too long because I didn't think anyone would listen. But maybe now, with everything happening, people will finally take notice. Her words hung in the air, forcing the executives to confront the reality of what she was saying. Some looked guilty, while others seemed defensive, as if they hadn't realized, or perhaps didn't care, how bad things had gotten under their watch. Daniel nodded approvingly at Maya before turning back to the group. Here's what's going to happen, he continued. First, we're conducting a full investigation into workplace practices here. That includes interviews with employees, reviews of past complaints, and an analysis of company policies. Second, mandatory diversity training will be implemented immediately. Not just a one-time session, but ongoing workshops designed to create real change. Third, leadership roles need to reflect the diversity of this workforce. Right now, they don't. And finally, there needs to be a clear, transparent system for reporting misconduct without fear of retaliation. The executives exchanged uneasy glances. These changes weren't small. They required effort, resources, and most importantly, accountability. One of them, a woman named Lisa, spoke up hesitantly. These are significant changes, Mr. Carter. While we agree they're necessary, implementing them won't happen overnight. Daniel raised an eyebrow. I'm aware of that, he replied. But I expect progress within weeks, not months. And let me make something very clear. My financial backing for this branch depends on these reforms being carried out effectively. If I don't see results, the consequences will be severe. The threat lingered in the air, unspoken but understood. No one doubted Daniel's ability to follow through. He was known for keeping his word, whether in business deals or personal matters. The executives nodded reluctantly, jotting down notes as if committing to memory every word he said. Meanwhile, Maya couldn't help but think about the ripple effect this might have. Employees had already started talking, sharing stories of their own experiences in hushed tones around water coolers and desks. Some approached her privately, offering support, or thanking her for speaking out. Others sent anonymous messages through internal communication platforms, recounting incidents of bias or harassment they'd endured. It was overwhelming, but also validating, to know she wasn't alone. As the meeting drew to a close, Daniel asked for a private word with HR representatives. He wanted to ensure that Kevin's behavior would be properly documented and addressed. When questioned about potential disciplinary action, Daniel didn't mince words. "He needs to go," he stated bluntly. "Not only did he target my wife, but he's also created a hostile work environment for countless others. Keeping him here sends the wrong message." The HR team agreed, though reluctantly. Firing Kevin meant admitting fault and potentially opening the door to lawsuits or negative publicity. But Daniel made it clear that protecting the company's reputation mattered less than doing the right thing. By the end of the day, Kevin Hayes was officially terminated, along with 2 other managers implicated in fostering a toxic culture. News of Kevin's firing spread quickly throughout the office. Some employees cheered quietly, relieved to see him gone. Others whispered nervously, wondering if similar scrutiny might fall on them. For Kevin himself, the fallout was immediate and devastating. Without references or glowing recommendations, finding another job proved nearly impossible. Rumors circulated online, fueled by social media posts from former co-workers detailing his behavior. His attempts to defend himself only dug him deeper into trouble, painting him as unrepentant and dismissive of the harm he'd caused. Back in the office, Maya found herself reflecting on the events of the past few days. She appreciated Daniel's unwavering support, but she also knew this fight wasn't over. Changing a workplace culture rooted in years of neglect wouldn't happen overnight. Still, she felt hopeful. For the first time, people were listening, not just to her, but to everyone who had been silenced for so long. Daniel joined her later that evening, bringing dinner to her desk. "How are you holding up?" he asked gently, setting down a bag of takeout. Maya sighed, picking at her food. "It's a lot to process," she admitted, "but I feel lighter somehow, like maybe this could actually lead to something good." The weeks following the incident felt like a whirlwind for Maya Johnson. Change came slowly but steadily, reshaping the workplace culture in ways she hadn't imagined possible. Daniel Carter's ultimatum had forced the company to take swift action, and while some employees grumbled about the sudden reforms, most welcomed the shift toward accountability and inclusivity. Maya found herself at the center of it all, not because she sought attention, but because people naturally looked to her as a symbol of resilience. Colleagues who had once ignored her now approached her with questions or shared their own stories of facing discrimination. It was overwhelming at times, but Maya appreciated the growing sense of solidarity. For years, she'd carried the weight of these experiences alone. Now she realized she didn't have to anymore. Daniel remained deeply involved in the process, using his influence to ensure the changes stuck. He worked closely with HR to review policies, pushing for transparency and fairness in every decision. His team conducted workshops on unconscious bias and inclusive leadership, helping employees recognize harmful behaviors they might not have noticed before. These sessions weren't always easy. Some participants resisted, dismissing the training as unnecessary. But over time, attitudes began to shift. One of the biggest transformations came in the form of new hires. With Daniel's guidance, the company committed to diversifying its leadership team. Talented individuals from underrepresented backgrounds were promoted or brought in from other organizations, bringing fresh perspectives and ideas. Maya noticed the difference almost immediately. Meetings became more collaborative, with voices that had long been silenced finally being heard. Still, not everyone was pleased with the changes. A handful of employees resented what they saw as preferential treatment for certain groups. They complained openly, accusing Daniel of overstepping his bounds and turning the workplace into a social experiment. Some even drafted petitions, demanding that management reconsider the new initiatives. But Daniel stood firm, refusing to back down. "It's funny how quickly people cry foul when they're asked to share power," he remarked during one particularly heated discussion with senior executives. "Equality isn't about taking anything away from anyone. It's about making sure everyone has a fair shot. Maya admired his determination, though she worried about the backlash. She knew firsthand how resistant people could be to change, especially when it challenged their privilege. But Daniel reminded her that progress often came with resistance. Change is uncomfortable, he told her one evening over dinner, but discomfort is where growth happens. As the months passed, Maya began to feel a renewed sense of purpose. Though she still loved her work as a data analyst, she realized her true passion lay in advocating for others. Inspired by Daniel's example, she started mentoring younger employees, particularly women and minorities, offering advice and encouragement whenever they faced obstacles. Her efforts didn't go unnoticed. Soon she was invited to join a newly formed diversity committee tasked with overseeing the company's ongoing reforms. For Kevin Hayes, life after termination was far less forgiving. Without references or glowing recommendations, finding another job proved nearly impossible. He applied to several positions, only to be rejected each time. Word of his behavior spread through professional networks, painting him as untrustworthy and difficult to work with. Desperate to salvage his reputation, Kevin took to social media, posting lengthy rants defending himself and blaming Maya for exaggerating the incident. His posts backfired spectacularly. Former co-workers chimed in, sharing their own negative experiences with him. One woman recounted how Kevin had mocked her accent during a meeting, reducing her to tears. Another described how he routinely excluded her from important projects, citing her lack of leadership potential. The comments section became a flood of accusations, leaving Kevin increasingly isolated and bitter. Eventually, Kevin stopped posting altogether, retreating into obscurity. Maya tried not to dwell on his downfall, focusing instead on the positive outcomes of the situation. Still, there were moments when she allowed herself a small sense of vindication. Knowing that someone like Kevin couldn't simply walk away unscathed gave her hope that justice, even delayed, was possible. Meanwhile, Daniel continued to use his platform to advocate for broader societal change. He partnered with organizations dedicated to combating racism and sexism in the workplace, funding programs aimed at empowering marginalized communities. His speeches at conferences and interviews with journalists amplified the message that businesses had a responsibility to lead by example. "You can't claim to value innovation while ignoring the voices of half your workforce," he said during one televised interview. True progress comes from embracing diversity, not just as a checkbox exercise but as a core principle. Maya watched these appearances with pride, marveling at how effortlessly Daniel commanded attention. Yet despite his public success, he never lost sight of what mattered most, supporting her in their shared vision for a better world. At home, he remained the same loving, grounded man she'd fallen in love with years ago. Their evenings were filled with quiet conversations about the future, dreams of starting a family, and plans to keep fighting for equality. By the end of the year, the company had undergone a remarkable transformation. Employee satisfaction surveys showed significant improvements, with many praising the new leadership and inclusive environment. Turnover rates dropped, and productivity soared. Even skeptics admitted, albeit grudgingly, that the changes had benefited everyone. For Maya, the journey wasn't without its challenges. Leaving behind colleagues who had once dismissed her stung, even if they no longer held power over her career. But she also recognized that staying in a toxic environment would have meant sacrificing her dignity and self-worth. With Daniel's encouragement, she decided to explore opportunities elsewhere, joining a startup aligned with her values. This new role allowed Maya to thrive in ways she hadn't thought possible. Freed from the constraints of a rigid corporate structure, she embraced her creativity and leadership skills. Within months, she was leading projects that made headlines, earning recognition not just within her industry, but across the tech community. Her success inspired others, proving that talent and hard work could overcome even the toughest barriers. Looking back, Maya realized how much she'd grown, not just professionally, but personally. She'd learned to trust her instincts, speak up for herself, and lean on those who supported her. Most importantly, she'd discovered the power of standing together with others to create meaningful change. Daniel often joked that Maya was the real hero of their story, but she knew better. They were partners, equals, united by a shared commitment to justice and equality. Together they proved that love and solidarity could spark transformation, not just in one workplace but in the world beyond. The air was electric with excitement as Maya Johnson stepped into the grand ballroom, her arm linked with Daniel Carter's. The annual Trailblazers in Tech and Business Gala was one of the most prestigious events of the year, drawing innovators, entrepreneurs, and leaders from around the world. Tonight, Maya felt like she belonged, not just among the crowd, but as someone who had earned her place through hard work and resilience. Her journey over the past year had been nothing short of transformative. After leaving her old job, Maya joined a startup focused on ethical practices and inclusivity. It wasn't always easy. There were long hours, tough decisions, and moments of doubt, but she thrived in an environment that valued collaboration and fairness. Her leadership shone brightly, earning her recognition not only within the company but also across the industry. Now, standing here at the gala, nominated for an award honoring Trailblazers in Tech, she felt a deep sense of pride. Daniel squeezed her hand gently, his eyes filled with admiration. "You've come so far," he whispered, leaning close enough for her to hear over the hum of conversation. "I'm so proud of you." Maya smiled, feeling warmth spread through her chest. "We've come so far," she corrected him softly. "None of this would have happened without you." He shook his head slightly, brushing off the credit. "You did the heavy lifting, Maya. I just helped clear the path." Their exchange was interrupted by applause as the host took the stage to announce the winners. Maya listened intently, her heart pounding in anticipation. When her name was called, she felt a rush of disbelief followed quickly by joy. Walking up to accept the award, she glanced back at Daniel, who gave her an encouraging nod. "Thank you," she began, her voice steady despite the spotlight shining down on her. "This honor means more to me than words can express, but I didn't get here alone. There are countless people who believed in me when I doubted myself, who stood by me when others tried to push me aside." She paused, looking out at the audience. Among the faces, she saw former colleagues who had supported her during difficult times, mentors who had guided her career, and friends who had cheered her on every step of the way. To anyone out there facing challenges in their workplace or personal life, don't give up. Change is possible, but it takes courage, and sometimes it takes standing together. Her speech drew a standing ovation, the room erupting in cheers and applause. As she returned to her seat, Daniel wrapped an arm around her shoulders, pulling her close. "That was beautiful," he murmured. "You're going to inspire so many people tonight." Later in the evening, Maya found herself reflecting on how much had changed since the day Kevin Hayes drenched her with soda. What had started as a humiliating incident had sparked a chain reaction, leading to profound shifts not just in her own life, but in the lives of others. The reforms implemented at her old company had set a precedent, inspiring similar efforts across industries. Employees everywhere were speaking up, demanding better treatment and accountability from their employers. Daniel continued to play a pivotal role in these movements, using his influence to amplify marginalized voices. His advocacy extended beyond boardrooms, reaching classrooms, community centers, and policy-making tables. Together, he and Maya became a powerful duo, combining their talents to drive meaningful change. But perhaps the most rewarding aspect of their journey was the impact they'd had on younger generations. Through mentorship programs and partnerships with schools, they encouraged students, especially those from underrepresented backgrounds, to pursue careers in STEM fields. Many of these young people wrote letters thanking Maya for being a role model, sharing how her story inspired them to dream bigger and aim higher. As the night wore on, Maya and Daniel mingled with other honorees, exchanging stories and ideas. One guest, a renowned scientist named Dr. Elena Martinez, approached them with a smile. "Your work is incredible," she said, shaking both their hands. "It's people like you who remind us why we do what we do." Maya blushed, unused to such praise. "We're just trying to make things better for everyone," she replied humbly. Dr. Martinez nodded thoughtfully. And that's exactly why your efforts matter. Progress isn't about perfection, it's about persistence. Keep pushing forward. Those words stayed with Maya long after the gala ended. On the ride home, she shared them with Daniel, who agreed, wholeheartedly. Persistence, he repeated, glancing at her. That's what got us here. And it's what will keep us moving forward. In the weeks that followed, Maya and Daniel continued their mission, tackling new challenges and exploring fresh opportunities. They launched a foundation dedicated to supporting women and minorities in tech, providing scholarships, internships, and networking resources. Their goal was simple yet ambitious: to create a future where no one felt excluded or undervalued because of who they were. For Maya, the experience reinforced a lesson she'd learned early on: that success wasn't measured solely by titles or awards. True fulfillment came from making a difference, from knowing that her actions had helped pave the way for others. She thought back to the young girl she'd once been, dreaming of a world where she could belong. That dream had become a reality. Not just for her, but for countless others. As they sat together one quiet evening, watching the city lights twinkle outside their window, Daniel turned to Maya with a thoughtful expression. "Do you ever think about how far we've come?" he asked. Maya nodded, leaning her head against his shoulder. "All the time," she admitted. "But I also think about how much further we can go. There's still so much work to be done." Daniel smiled, kissing the top of her head. "Then let's keep doing it together." And with that promise, they looked toward the horizon, ready to face whatever lay ahead. Their love, partnership, and shared commitment to justice had already sparked transformation in ways they never imagined. But they knew this was just the beginning. The road ahead might be long, but with persistence and each other, they were ready to take it on.